This is meeting number 25, the Subcommittee on International Human Rights. Today we meet on a briefing on the persecution of religious and ethnic minorities in Afghanistan. To ensure an orderly meeting, I would encourage all participants to mute their microphones when they're not speaking and address all comments through the chair. When you have 30 seconds left in your questioning time, I'll raise this 30-second note just so you're aware. And interpretation is available to everyone through the globe icon. It's at the bottom of your screen. So it's available in English or French. You select, if you are bilingual, you don't have to do anything. If you're not, then select the one that would work best for you. Our witnesses for the 2 hours are the following. And we've got from the World Sikh Organization of Canada, Balpreet Singh. He's legal counsel. Welcome, Balpreet. From the United Sikhs, we've got Sukhwinder Singh, National Director. And we got Gurvinder Singh, Director, International Humanitarian Aid. From Manmeet Singh Bullar Foundation, we've got Tarjinder Kaur Bullar, Director. And we've got Jasjeet S. Ajimal, and I apologize if I've mispronounced any of the names, co-chair of the Save Afghan Minorities Project. From the Canadian Hazara Humanitarian Services, we've got Ali Mirzad, who's the senior advisor. We have with us today Niamatullah Ibrahimi, lecturer in international relations, La Trobe University, Australia. We've got Melissa Kerr Chiovenda, assistant professor of anthropology, Zayed University, Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates. And finally, we've got William Malley, and he's the emeritus professor at the Australian National University, Canberra, Australia. So witnesses, each of you are going to have, not each of you, but each of your particular groups will have up to 6 minutes to make opening statements, remarks. And we are going to start with the World Sikh Organization of Canada. And I'd ask you to please go ahead for 6 minutes. Thank you.
All right, good evening. Thank you. I'm legal counsel with the World Sikh Organization of Canada. We're a non-profit human rights organization established in 1984 with a mandate to promote and protect the interests of Canadian Sikhs, as well as to protect the human rights of all individuals. Almost exactly 5 years ago, I testified in front of the Standing Committee on Citizenship and Immigration on a similar topic to this, and I reported that Sikhs and Hindus are communities under siege in Afghanistan and face an immediate threat to their lives. They numbered approximately 2,000 at that time, from an original population that was estimated to be in the tens of thousands prior to 1992. Today, as a result of ongoing persecution and several deadly attacks, the number has dwindled to approximately 200. Those that remain in Afghanistan are in constant danger, and those that have fled live in precarious and troubled conditions in India, with no real prospects of permanent settlement. As a matter of background, my experience with the Afghan Sikh community began in November 2014, when I received a desperate series of messages from a remote Afghan Sikh community in Helmand province, who were facing imminent danger. Their homes had been stoned, their businesses had been publicly boycotted. At that time, Manmeet Singh Bullar was a friend of mine, and I spoke to him about the situation, and he made it his life's work until his tragic death in November 2015 to save that community. The current situation for Sikhs and Hindus in Afghanistan is one of fear, persecution, and imminent threat. They're unable to freely leave their homes, find employment, attend schools. Women are unable to leave their homes unaccompanied, and there's a constant fear of kidnapping. The remaining Sikhs and Hindus in Afghanistan live collectively in gurdwaras, as much of their property has been taken by others. These conditions also existed in 2016. What's changed is that the situation has gotten much worse, with the community being actively targeted with attacks by Daesh, who vowed to drive them out of Afghanistan. On July 1st, 2018, the entire leadership of the Sikh and Hindu community was killed in a suicide bombing. 15 Sikhs and 4 Hindus who were on their way to a meeting with Afghan President Ashraf Ghani lost their lives. Daesh took responsibility for that attack. On March 25th, 2020, so just a little over a year ago, in another Daesh suicide attack, Gurdwara Guru Har Rai Sahib was attacked in Kabul. 25 Sikhs lost their lives, including 4-year-old Tanya Kaur. The funeral for the victims of this attack the following day was also targeted with a bombing attack. In June 2020, Nidan Singh was abducted from a gurdwara and held for almost a month until his rescue. On July 18th, 2020, 13-year-old Salmeet Kaur, who lost her father in the March attack, was kidnapped from another gurdwara in Kabul. On February 2nd, 2021, a series of bomb attacks killed one Sikh and injured two others in an area with several Sikh shops. The victim, Sunny Singh, never got to see his newborn son in India, and his wife watched his funeral on a video call. With the US pullout from Afghanistan being imminent, the situation promises to get much worse for minorities. A member of the Hazara minority community said it best when he said, "To be a member of a minority in Afghanistan is hell, but to be a Sikh means to be in the innermost circle of hell." 429 Sikhs and Hindus fled Afghanistan for India in July 2020 on a special visa valid for 6 months. Those that fled may not face an immediate threat to their lives, but they're still suffering. There are no real permanent settlement prospects for these refugees, despite the claims of the Indian government in India. India's Hindu nationalist BJP government is playing politics as it tries to project itself as the savior of minorities fleeing Muslim countries, but in actuality provides no assistance to them or any options for settlement. Families that fled last July continue to be supported by Sikh organizations and private donors. There's no access to basic services such as healthcare and education, or even vaccination for COVID. Very few of them have found employment. 8 Afghan Sikh families recently returned to Afghanistan out of desperation. This was a move that was celebrated by the Afghanistan government. Most of them have now returned once again back to India. One family reported that they couldn't find a hospital to care for their daughter in New Delhi, and after receiving treatment in Kabul, they returned because they felt unsafe remaining there. Since 2015, we've repeatedly called on the Canadian government to create a special program for Afghan Sikhs and Hindus so that they can come to safety in Canada. In July 2020, 25 Canadian MPs from the CPC, NDP, and Greens wrote to the Minister of Immigration for this special program, but I'm not aware of a reply to this letter, let alone any progress in this regard. After the March attack, there was a weekly call set up with a representative of CIC, which was then reduced to bi-weekly and then canceled altogether with no reply to our emails since August 2020. The question isn't whether there will be another attack. The question is when will be the next attack. These are extremely vulnerable individuals who do not have a future in Afghanistan or in India, and they're looking desperately to Canada to save their lives. It's been frustrating to advocate without real results on their behalf for this long. The Sikh community is willing and able to pay for all the resettlement costs and has done so for the small number of Sikh refugee families that have arrived from the Helmand group. We just need the government to give us the permission to bring them here. Those are my comments for now.
Thank you. And ahead of time, that was great. Thank you very much. And we're moving now to the United Sikhs for 6 minutes.
Hello, respected members of committee. Thank you for allowing United Sikhs to speak for Afghan minorities. We are United Nations affiliated international non-profit NGO to empower those in need, especially disadvantaged and minority communities around the world with humanitarian aid, advocacy, and education programs. We have 10 chapters in Asia, Europe, and North America. We have an office in Peshawar, Pakistan also. So Ghazni, Jalalabad, and Kabul are the 3 major cities in Afghanistan where minorities, families are concentrated in large numbers. United Sikhs has been providing legal assistance and humanitarian aid in these cities for the past many years. Our first case in Afghanistan started in 2010 with the Harinder Kaur and her daughter, whom we provided help in taking asylum in Canada with the help of Canadian government because her husband was kidnapped and then beheaded. So after that, so many times minorities were attacked brutally. They were forced to pay jizya, verbal and written threats, including ultimatums to leave the country, social boycotts, not even drinking water from their fountains, which they have in front of their shops and in front of their houses. They were called kafirs. Kids couldn't go to schools. Women and young girls couldn't go out because of kidnapping threats. So this was the life they were living in Afghanistan. So then after Gurdwara attack in 2020, this was the day when all the NGOs and Afghan Sikhs and Hindus decided to move temporarily to India so then we can bring them to safe place like Canada and USA. So till now, as Balpreet said, so total 95 families have reached New Delhi, India from different parts of Afghanistan. United Six and other NGOs are the only help for them. They have no help from Indian government, not even their IDs. So last year, United Six started a help desk in New Delhi for these families. So where they are getting medical treatment, including special tests as needed, urgent assistance with the needs of pregnant mothers in government hospitals, and life-sustaining needs of newborn babies, including immunizations, emergency medical procedures, facilitation for UNHCR-related issues like issuing refugee cards, renewal of the cards for previously Afghan nationals residing in New Delhi, ration distribution to needy Afghan families, COVID-19 rapid tests, assistance in temporary settlement of Afghan families in India. So what the challenges they having now, they do not have any identification. If they make any identification, then they cannot get their refugee cards, refugee status. So they are just in between. And for refugee status, UNHCR says they came to India on a visa which is not suitable to get a refugee status. So these are their challenges. Their kids cannot get education. They have no jobs. They're not getting proper medical treatments. So their only hope is us, Canadian government. So I will request Canadian government, so please stop a cultural genocide. Now I will ask Gurvinder Singh to add few points more, and please wrap it up. Thank you.
Yes, so I would first and foremost thank everyone for allowing us this gathering and for listening to this testimony about what is happening and what has transpired over the past many years. One number or a few numbers I think that are striking is the fact that over 100,000 Sikhs and Hindus resided in Afghanistan just a few decades ago. That number dwindled down to 626 prior to the Kabul attack. Now that number is below 100. So that goes to show that a vibrant, robust community, which has its cultural heritage, which has its religious heritage, which has its economic structure, embedded in the nation, has been gone and has been dismantled and has had a genocide perpetrated against it. So we're concerned about our religious institutions, about our cultural institutions that are hundreds of years old, about the caretaking of those. We're concerned about the safety and security of the community. And if the Canadian government does not step up, then this will be known in history as a time where a minority was forcefully evicted, eradicated, or killed and completely decimated from the map of a nation. And I think it is inherently, it behooves us so we can step up and really provide assistance to those who literally have no one else to turn to. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll hear from Manmeet Singh Bhullar Foundation for 6 minutes.
Thank you to all of you, and thank you to the witnesses that spoke before me. The invitation to appear before this committee is important for us, and I appreciate the efforts made to have us a part of this. For some of you, this may be the first time that you are hearing about the Manmeet Singh Bhullar Foundation. Ours is an existence that is equally filled with pride and with pain. This foundation is in honor of a man whose presence is missed by his community and most of all, by his family. Not a single day goes by where we do not wish that he was still here with us, that he was speaking to you. But what we do carry with us are his values and his work, and they are a guiding force for us. In 2015, or late 2014, I should say, Manmeet began the Safe Afghan Minorities Project, as Balpreet mentioned. As his sister, I was used to his bold ideas, his chicken scratches on a notepad that made no sense to anyone else, but gave him the clarity that he needed in order to get something done. I knew his ability to engross others in his plans and his perseverance. Every single setback for him was a reminder to fight harder, think bigger. Most of all, I was used to a singular focus on serving others. It was his mantra, his faith, his purpose. He took meetings across cities in Canada. He traveled to India. He went to countries in Europe, relentless in his pursuit to find a viable solution for Sikh and Hindus in Afghanistan who lived a daily reality void of religious freedom, no access to education, no safety, and definitely no peace. The only constant for them was danger. Time and time and time again, no matter what solution he pursued, no matter where he went, he knew that the country best suited to help these children, men and women, and elderly was his own country. Canada was the place that could and should serve as a beacon of hope for these families, as it has for my own family, his family, and for countless others who have shown that through the course of time, Canada is the place where you can make a life that allows you to thrive. Calling it his life's most important work and making it his primary focus every waking moment, Manmeet charted a path for these families. First, the goal was to get them out of Afghanistan in imminent danger, then to find a way to get them refugee status granted, and eventually to a new home and a new life here in Canada. The first handful of families were guided out of Afghanistan through his coordination of every small or big logistical detail that needed to be done. And then Manmeet's own life was taken in his final act of kindness towards another human being. For anyone who has experienced the sudden and traumatic loss of a loved one, my heart holds your pain and shares your grief. In losing Manmeet, it became clear that while our lives would never be the same again, the lives of others were in jeopardy, complete strangers that were relying on him to survive. And so the profound responsibility he felt was now the responsibility that we had to carry on for him and because of him. Since Manmeet's passing, this work has been all-consuming. Daily phone calls from families in India and Afghanistan, individuals that speak about an existence that so many of us are oblivious to or too privileged enough to ever know anything about. A visit to the market in Afghanistan leads to hot oil being spilled on their body. A death of a family member means funeral rites cannot be performed as per their faith. A woman walking with her child must hide her own identity and conform to the religious identity of others. Families are in dire need of basic medical attention for their elderly parents. We have worked with the Canadian government since 2015 after Manmeet's passing to settle 74 individuals here in Canada, with 111 in the queue. These people come from the Helmand province, which at that point were the most in danger and dire of assistance. This is not a task we have done alone. It is because of community members, organizations, donors, volunteers that we have been able to do this. We have been focused on the approach that first we make sure that these individuals survive and then we enable them to thrive. Each arrival of a family renews our commitments to Manmeet's vision of giving these families and these children a fighting chance. Now we see them attending school, getting a driver's license, taking English classes, volunteering themselves. It provides us with a solid belief that we must continue this work and we must help the families that are remaining. At every turn, I have worked with ministers in this government. I advocate to them, they advocate for us, and we have made progress. I've been raised to give credit where credit is due. And so Minister Sudgeon and Minister Mendocino, Minister Baines, as well as many other people across the aisle and within the Liberal caucus have championed this. Soon the remaining families that first went to India will be eligible to settle here in Canada. The last 15 months of the pandemic have brought with it its own challenges, many beyond anyone's control. Through it all, we have had a steady and consistent communication with the government, finding a viable way through this all. And we will make sure that this work is done. We owe it to fellow members of humanity, and I owe it to my brother. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for those remarks. And now we are going to hear now from the Canadian Hazara Humanitarian Services for up to 6 minutes. And I believe it's Ali Mirzad is going to be speaking.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. On behalf of the Canadian Hazara Humanitarian Services, I thank this committee and the Canadian Parliament for granting us this opportunity to raise.
De nous offrir cette occasion de représenter les centaines et les milliers de victimes Hazara qui ont perdu.
Point of order.
The channels are crossed, I'm hearing.
I think we have some challenges with the interpretation. They're crossed over. So the English and the French. We can, and I apologize to our witness if we could just start from the beginning once again.
Mr. Chair, it might be the settings at the bottom. I think he may have it on
okay.
French.
Yes, sir. Mr. Mirzad, if you could just check your settings on the globe icon at the bottom. Mm-hmm. Have you selected? So you have to select the language that you are comfortable with, that you prefer, the English, French, or if you're bilingual, you could leave it without selecting either.
Yep, I have it as neither. It's off.
It's off. Okay. Are you bilingual? Do you speak French? You do. Yep. Okay. Okay. So let's try that one more time. But sure. Thank you, MP Sidhu, for that, and we'll take it from the start, please.
No problem. Gives me 2 minutes extra. Merci, Monsieur le Président. On behalf of the Canadian Hazara Humanitarian Services, I thank this committee and the Canadian Parliament for granting us the opportunity to raise the voices of the many thousands of Hazara victims that have perished in Afghanistan and the many thousands more that continue to suffer systemic persecution. Monsieur le Président, le peuple Hazara a subi plus d'un siècle de persécution perpétuelle en raison de ses croyances.
Because of its religious beliefs, its ethnicity. Mr. Chairman, the Hazara people have suffered over 100 years of suffering because of their religious beliefs, their ethnicity, and their physical and facial characteristics. At the end of the 19th century, thousands, if not millions, were massacred and forcefully displaced, sold into slavery in Afghanistan by Mr. Abdullah Khan.
Openly labeled Hazaras as heretic foreigners. This paved the way for persecution that continues to this day. In 1998, the Taliban issued a similar decree continuing that campaign by killing thousands of Hazaras in the cities of Mazar-e-Sharif and Bamiyan alone. In post-9/11 Afghanistan, Hazaras continue to be the subject of daily attacks, be it within the sanctuary of religious places, in gymnasiums, in the streets, or on public buses. Attacks such as the May 2020 assault on the Médecins Sans Frontières maternity ward in Kabul's Dashtibarchi, where infants still in incubators were targeted, or the May 2021 attack on the Said al-Shahada all-girls school, where as many as 94 young girls died, have proven that Hazaras are a target regardless of age or gender. To put it simply, Mr. Chair, the life of a Hazara in Afghanistan is that of a death row inmate living on borrowed time, awaiting an impending execution. Mr. Chair, for years around the globe, and indeed across this nation, coast to coast to coast, Hazaras have cried for help. We humbly request this committee, and through it, the Canadian Parliament to, 1, formally recognize the 1891-1893 ethnic cleansing perpetrated against the Hazara as a genocide. 2, to designate September 25th as a Hazara Genocide Memorial Day. And 3, to support Bill C-287 to ensure that all development assistance sent from Canada to Afghanistan is contributing to the peace and security of the region for all peoples. Sur ce, Monsieur le Président, encore une fois.
On these, Mr. Chairman, I would like to thank this committee for the opportunity granted me today, and I'd also like to thank the 3 individuals who have representing our organization. We have with us Dr. Melissa Chovanda, Professor of Anthropology in Zayed University, Professor William Malley, Emeritus Professor, Australian National University,
University, Melbourne, Australia. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, and thank you to the organizations, your spokespersons that made a statement, opening statement, and to all the witnesses that are with us here today. We are going to now move to the members' question time. So we'll start with the first round. The first round will be 7 minutes per each member that will be questioning. We are going to start with MP Sidhu for 7 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Chair, I was fortunate enough to know Manmeet Singh Bhullar before he passed. His dedication to service is a model for, I think, all of us here working to make Canada and the world a better place. In light of that, I want to talk about the success that the Manmeet Singh Bhullar Foundation has achieved in his memory. Of those Afghan Sikhs who have so far arrived in Canada, can you please outline how they are doing? Mr. Chair, through you, this question is for the Manmeet Singh Bhullar Foundation.
Thank you, MP Sidhu. I would be remiss if I gave up this opportunity to say that Manmeet would be incredibly overjoyed to see you as a member of Parliament, and I would question himself. The families they're thriving, and that is the ultimate goal that guides us through this work. It is not easy work. It is not work that we can shy away from. But these are families that have now, had children going to school for the first time. They have, many of them have long-term full-time jobs. They are taking English classes. They have a robust connection to the Gurdwara in Northeast Calgary, as well as Gurdwaras in Surrey, where they are residing. They constantly keep in contact and talk about what can they do next. What is their future? And it sounds simple to us, but remarkable when you think about where they came from. The biggest thing, I think, is when you see, I think the measure of this project and the measure of the lifelong impact we will have is from the young children that we are looking at. Some of them started off completely shy to even say hello. And now they are reading in English, speaking in English, and genuinely, when you see them, they're coming up to you to say hello and talking to you about what their life here is all about. As cliche as it sounds, they are living a normal Canadian life, and that is absolutely amazing when you think of where they were just a few short years ago.
Thank you for that answer, Ms. Bhullar, and definitely I really appreciate all your hard work, and it's great to hear that the Afghan Sikhs from the Afghan Sikh community are settling in well. Ms. Bhullar, over the past year, I think we can all understand that the COVID-19 crisis has slowed down your work to welcome members of the Afghan Sikh community to Canada. I would like to get a better understanding of what work the Manmeet Singh Bhullar Foundation has done in partnership with the Government of Canada over the past year. In your opening statement, you mentioned that there will be a path forward once conditions allow for it. First, I want to thank you again for your advocacy, as well as for all the work over the past number of years the Manmeet Singh Bhullar Foundation has done to help Afghan Sikhs resettle, and your support here in Canada. For this program, are you the sole partner with the government, and will it be an effective path for you to continue welcoming members of the Afghan Sikh community to Canada?
Yes, so there's no doubt that every single part of our lives have been impacted by COVID, and this project is no different. We look at what is happening in India, and when we see that people are fighting for even the basics of access to oxygen, we understand that offices can't work like they used to. But make no mistake that there has been work done behind the scenes between us as the foundation and the Government of Canada to make sure that we are in a place that when those restrictions for travel are lifted and when India is in a better place to process these applications, and it is safe to do so, that we see an influx of the remaining families from the cohort that arrived from Helmand to make their way into Canada. So that has involved us to not stop in our pursuit of constantly being in touch and making sure that we have a process in place that allows us to have basically everything done besides getting these individuals on a plane when it is safe to do so. We also have to keep in mind that a lot of the challenges that we face are from a government or a country that India is dealing with their own challenges at the moment. And so all of these factor in, but in no way have we stalled and said that we are on pause. In fact, what we have made very clear is that how can we work together to make sure that we get everything set in motion, so that really the only thing left once we are in a better place with the pandemic is that we get to be at the airport meeting these people as they arrive.
Thank you, Ms. Bhullar. And it'd be interesting to learn more about the process on how you support members of the Afghan Sikh community, just if you can provide us some insights into that as well.
Absolutely. As I mentioned in my opening statement, these families are people that we are in constant contact with. they have many conduits within the community, and the foundation is definitely one of them. As a family, we support them when they are in India. As recently as about a month and a half ago, the concern was that they do not have adequate supply for food because of the pandemic. And so, of course, it is everyone's responsibility to make sure that we help each other. From a sponsorship point of view, really what we work closely with in terms of our sponsors and our donors that have come on board with us is to say that we are the primary responsibility to ensure that when these families arrive here in Canada, we are providing them every basic need that they have, as well as setting them up for success. So that means providing them with housing, providing them with every single supply that they need in that house, then setting them up with settlement agencies to make sure that they are receiving their healthcare card, getting proper medical attention. As you can imagine, many of them have never seen a doctor in so long. And then enrolling them into school. And once the children are in school, something as simple as when the pandemic hit, it was all about making sure that they had access to tablets, to laptops, to make sure that they could still continue their education. That's a responsibility that we have based on the principles that are set out through the private sponsorship agreement. And I have to say that, my dad often says that these are people that have become extended family. And so whether it's a birth of a new child, it's it's a school milestone, it's something that we take part in.
And thank you for that very detailed answer, Ms. Boulder. And we're all Canadians. We wear our heart on our sleeves, and that's what we're known for. And it's great that you mentioned that it's not just your foundation. It's with partnerships with the community, amongst other organizations and associations, that they've all stepped up, come together to support the Afghan Sikh community. Mr. Chair, I think I have like 5 seconds left, so I may not have time for another question, but I just want to take this moment to thank all the other witnesses for being here as well.
Thank you, MP Sidhu. Your time has just come to an end. And we're moving now to MP Chu for 7 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The questions I have are for representatives from both the Sikh community and also the Hazara community. They will be one set of questions for each. So let's just go with the Sikh community to start with for now. The set of question is, the first one is, I've for the two communities, unfortunately, they have similar backgrounds in that they're being persecuted and rejected by the native Afghanistan population, and therefore they're facing persecution and imminent danger of being wiped off. And so the first question I have is, can you comment on the home country's efficacy? So I heard that through you guys that for example, India has been posturing to receive refugees from Afghanistan. But what about Persia, Iran? Are they helping the Hazara community? And in the case of India, what prevent them from settling in the Punjab province area? And the second question then would be to go through post-COVID Canada support. I will talk about that later in the interest of time. So the first question, I'd like you to comment on the home country, the what I call the home country's advocacy on their behalf. So let's go with the Punjab province and also the Sikh community. Anybody?
Yeah, I can comment on that. Like I said, the Indian government is currently a right-wing Hindu government, and it postures itself as being a protector of minorities that have fled Muslim countries. But in fact, the protections that it offers, the protection it offers is essentially just providing a visitor's visa, a 6-month visitor's visa. In terms of actual, there's nothing. So there's no permanent path to permanent settlement in India. They're not a signatory to the Refugee Convention. So There have been some glimpses of hope, but they are not for the recent refugee arrivals. For example, there's a controversial Citizenship Amendment Act that was passed. It excludes Muslim refugees, but it opens the door to non-Muslim refugees. Thing is, it only applies to those that have arrived before December 31st, 2014. And after being passed over a year ago, the rules for it still haven't been framed. There have been certain districts where the government announces that applications will be accepted for refugees, but it's a completely random process, and it's only certain districts at random from the Indian map.
Thank you.
So,
Mr. Singh, if I may add?
Yes, please.
Just like Mr. Singh mentioned, India's situation is the population there is extremely precarious, and the local populations are well aware that the Afghans arriving are precarious. So these Afghans have been targeted of consistent crime. Their houses have been broken into. The local authorities harass them when they try to use public transportation. When they try to go to the hospitals in a public setting, they're not able to do so. So local organizations and organizations abroad are helping the families with medical care. The precarious situation continues and continues to get worse. So as scarcity hits India, this population is targeted further, and they are then isolated by locals and then harassed and then persecuted, and the cycle continues.
Okay, I'd like to.
I saw Mr. Malley's hand up, and also I see, I believe it's Ms. Kerr's hand up. So if
unfortunately,
I don't know, Mr. Chu, if you'd like them to also answer, but they do have their hands up.
Yes, I also like to hear witnesses from the Hazari community as well. So why don't we spend the next 30 seconds on further comment from the Sikh community, please?
Yeah, I can just say that Sikh refugees initially left Afghanistan en masse in 1992. They tried to settle in India at that time. They returned en masse again because there was no prospects for them there. The situation has seriously deteriorated since 1992. Currently, there's no prospects for them. For example, the family I mentioned, they can't get healthcare for their daughter, so they have to go back to Afghanistan to get a hospital, and then they don't feel safe there, so they have to come back to Delhi. It's just a really bad situation.
Thank you. In the interest of time, let's switch over to the Hazari community. Mr. Malley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I think we should be wary of seeing Iran as a protective player with respect to Hazaras from Afghanistan. Firstly, Hazaras are often located in vulnerable places that are quite remote from the territory of Iran. But more seriously, Iran has historically not been a particularly generous host to Hazara refugees. In recent times, there's been plenty of evidence of Hazaras being forcibly deported from Iran to Afghanistan. There's also been evidence of Hazaras being press-ganged by Iranian agencies for use in other areas where Iran finds itself involved in proxy combat. So it's actually quite a dangerous environment for Hazaras in Iran, who have long experienced quite a lot of discrimination at the hands of the Iranian state.
Monsieur Président, Monsieur...
Oui?
Mr. Chairman, I don't think you saw my hand raised.
Alexei, yes, go ahead.
Oui, c'est ça. Malheureusement, l'interprétation.
Unfortunately, the interpretation is having difficulty with Mr. Malley's sound quality.
Because that was, and I've stopped the time, so we've still got a little while. So, Mr. Malley.
Je peux me permettre, Monsieur le Président, dans l'oreille l'interprétation.
If you allow me, the interpreter has indicated that it is a sound quality issue, technical.
Clerk? No? Okay. Mr. Malley, could you just say a couple of sentences to see if...
Yes, the situation for Hazaras...
okay, now Mr. Malley, I don't know if that's any better. Did you change something from when you got tested to when we started at this time? When you started answering the question on your computer or your headset?
No, if your team wants to identify a particular setting in the interpretation button, I'm happy to go to that.
Which one are you on right now?
I'm on off at the moment.
You're on off. Okay. So, but they say it's technical. It's not. So, Clerk, do you have any thoughts?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Perhaps the boom mic gets a little bit too far from the mouth.
Yes, and if you could speak a little bit slower, please, and try that.
Okay. Mr. Chair, should I repeat the points that I made earlier for the benefit of your colleague?
Well, we're just trying to fix it, whatever technical issues that we have. I don't know if it's the Aussie accent, but we'll see how that goes.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, when he was speaking slowly and asking to repeat, the interpreter was able to follow, so please.
Okay. So Mr. Malley would ask that you just slow your cadence in terms of your speaking. And so I've just, I stopped the time. So I think we've got I'd say about a minute that we have left, MP Chu, okay? And then we'll go to the next member. Alexi, you're okay? Okay.
Yes.
Mr. Malley, Mr. Chair, through you, I would like to give 15 seconds for Professor Malley to finish his comment, and after that, I'd like to have Ms. Kerr to comment.
Okay,
and
go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. My broad point is that Iran is not a reliable source of protection for Hazaras who are vulnerable within Afghanistan, and it really falls in the lap of the wider world to perform some protective responsibilities with respect to those people.
Ms. Kerr.
And so I would like to add, I'm in full agreement with everything that Professor Malley said. In addition to not being a reliable source of protection and being quite abusive towards Hazaras, there is not really any mechanism for Hazaras to gain a permanent asylum in Iran, despite the fact that they have the same religion, Shia religion. So people who have been refugees, who have been in Iran, even for generations, Hazaras who have been born in Iran, often find themselves just depending on the whim of the government, all of a sudden in the same situation where they might be facing deportation or might be facing something else. And so you find, not only are Hazara refugees fleeing Afghanistan, but there's also some numbers of Hazara refugees that are fleeing the situation in Iran that they may have actually been born into. So Iran definitely can be counted on.
That does conclude the time. We are going. Thank you, Mr. Chu. So we are moving to MP Alexi Brunel-Duceppe. For those that are not bilingual, you may want to select English or French, whatever you may need to, if you need interpretation. Alexi, you're on.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Et d'ailleurs,
thank you very much, Chair, and I'd like to thank the interpreters who usually do an excellent job and allow us to communicate more effectively. I'd like to thank the witnesses this evening. We are learning a number of things, and they are highlighting the situation that is currently is. So thank you very, very much for being here this evening. Much appreciated. I'd like to open it to any of the witnesses. I'm not going to identify a person to respond. The question was valid for all the witnesses. The Afghan Constitution allows for that. There is freedom of religion, technically, in their Constitution. They can practice their religion as they see fit. Now, this question is for all the witnesses. Can you tell us what limits the actual respect of this law that allows religions other than Islam to be practiced? So it's an open question to all and each witness.
Chairman and honorable members of the committee. With regard to this question, as you mentioned, in Afghanistan's 2004 constitution, there is an extensive set of rights.
Malheureusement, point d'ordre, monsieur, je suis désolé.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker, but perhaps if the witness could hold the microphone in front of his mouth, it would help the interpreter to understand what's going on.
Could you please unplug and replug your headset to make sure that it is properly selected?
Okay.
Now I cannot hear you at all. Is there a mute button on the wire of your headset? Can you please say a few more sentences?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, please.
Okay. Okay. Well, I was trying to say that in 2004 Constitution, there is an extensive set of rights granted to Afghan citizens that includes the right to practice their religion.
Mr. Chair, the sound is not adequate.
Okay, so I'm sorry, Mr. Abrahimi, we're going to have to move to another witness till you can sit down.
Monsieur le Président, c'est la dernière séance du comité. On s'en reparlera.
This is the last meeting of this committee, and I'm sorry, sir. Go ahead. This is our last meeting as a committee before we rise for the summer, and I don't want to deprive Mr. Ibrahimi the opportunity to answer. There seems to be a technical problem, so.
But do you want to hear from another witness?
No, j'aimerais entendre Monsieur Ibrahimi.
I'd rather hear from Mr. Ibrahimi, rather. Look, I'm going to put myself on the floor channel, and I will listen to him directly in English, because unfortunately there's a disconnect for technical reasons through the interpretation channels. So I'll listen in English.
Well, I will try to be slow and brief. Afghanistan's 2004 Constitution provides an extensive set of rights for citizens of Afghanistan that includes the right to practice religion, including for non-Muslims. But in practice, people of various religious backgrounds, including many Muslims, face daily discrimination and persecution at different levels. I think I would like to echo what members of the Sikh community have shared with us today, because as an Afghan human rights worker, I have also researched Afghan Sikh community situation in Afghanistan. But I would also like to remind you the fact that behind me are the images of the young girls who died on 8th of May outside the Shuhada High School in Dashti area of Kabul. This is an area where it is populated by Shia Hazara Muslims. And that attack took 85 young people, mainly students of year 7 and year 11. These are typical teenagers you would find anywhere around the world who would have dreams to live a normal life. And as we see, the Taliban is stepping up their attack in Afghanistan. There is also in many ways a reversal of some of those rights that were provided to different groups in Afghanistan. While Hazaras are the primary targets of escalation of violence and attacks across Afghanistan and Kabul, there's also increasing attack and restrictions placed on other groups. So it is difficult to be in Afghanistan if you are, let us say, a liberal Afghan. We have seen a series of targeted assassinations directed towards Afghan journalists, civil society groups, and people who hold different views in comparison to those of the Taliban. So I think at the center of all of this is in fact this attacks directed towards the Hazaras Industry Masjid, this area in Kabul, because this Hazaras, this area represents much of what has been achieved over the past 20 years of international intervention in Afghanistan, and now all of those threats are under, all of those gains are under threat. You see young women going to school.
I am have to interject. I understand that the way that this is working for the interpreters, that this would be in contravention of the Official Languages Act, and it is not possible. We cannot continue this. So we are going to have to move to another witness. I apologize.
I'm happy
due to these issues.
Mr. Chair, I'm happy to speak to the matter.
Mr. Singh, yeah. Or Mr. Ajamal. Sorry, yes. I saw Mr. Ajamal's hand go up first, and then Mr. Singh.
So carrying on what Mr. Abrahimi was saying, these aren't isolated incidents. These are incidents where, from the Sikh community, we had a member who went from Helmand to Kabul, and before traveling to India, he was shot in a marketplace, in a populated marketplace. These are targeted attacks on religious minorities. So although laws may be in place, these laws are not enforced. Afghanistan, it does not have a stable grip on the situation. They're not able to protect any community members from the Sikh community, and as my colleagues have stated, from the Hazara community as well. So although laws may be in place, they're not practiced. These are policies that are just on paper, and in reality, these folks are targeted, they are killed in populated markets, they are kidnapped, they are not able to practice their faith whatsoever. There's targeted bombing attacks, and if they try to assemble in any shape or form, they are attacked. And a number of cases have already occurred and have been widely reported. And what we fear is future attacks, which, as my colleague stated, Mr. Singh stated, they're imminent. It's just a matter of time.
Just so everybody's aware, so the clerk did inform me that it was in contravention, and that's why we had to move away from Mr. Abrahimi. And I've added an extra couple of minutes to Alexi to your time. Okay, so you've still got another 2.5 minutes.
Oui, mais je pense que M. Singh voulait rajouter quelque chose là.
I believe Mr. Singh is in the process of adding information. I'd like to hear him.
Question. There's two things. So one thing is the law in written format, and then the law in practice. So it's completely different when you go to practice. Sikhs, Hindus, and minorities have actually had to pay the jizya, which is a tax for all non-Muslims living in Afghanistan. So that's first and foremost. Secondly, the targeting and the wanton destruction of minorities is at such a state that after the Kabul bomb blast, Sikhs were not even allowed to have a funeral procession in peace. The procession was targeted. There were bombs placed along the routes. There were bombs placed in front of Sikh homes in gurdwaras. And then after the procession actually gets to the funeral pyre to do the funeral, then there's another bomb that goes off. So this is a continued targeting, continued assassination, and in short form, it's a complete genocide of minorities who are at any odds with those who do not profess their faith. And again, even to live, you are just trying to breathe is difficult because you pay the tax simply to exist. You have to live in inferiority, and you have to live in fear.
Merci, M. Singh. J'aimerais ça attendre Madame.
I'd like to hear Ms. Chuvenda if we have time, please.
I'd just like to add to, in addition to this question about whether laws are enforced or not, yes, this is part of the Constitution, and in some instances, the Afghan government has in fact contradicted this. So there has been, for example, a Hazara who was placed in jail for blasphemy because of something he wrote regarding Buddhism and the bombing on Buddha statues that you guys might know has been exploded by the Taliban in 2001. but a lot of these actions and events and bombings, in the case of Hazaras, of mosques and Shia mosques and centers, or the attacks on the Sikh community as well. I mean, they're not carried out by the Afghan government, of course. The Afghan government is not, however, providing adequate protection. We don't know, surely, if they're unable or unwilling, but at this point, it doesn't really matter. They're either unable or unwilling.
Thank you, Ms. Chiovenda. Thank you. And now we're moving to MP McPherson for 7 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I want to thank all of our witnesses today. This is incredibly compelling testimony and very important for information for us to be gathering from you. The questions that I really want to understand and get quite a bit of clarity on, if I could, is the current context we're in. So of course we know right now that we are in the middle of a COVID-19 pandemic. We are different places around the world are responding differently and are at different points in recovery from that. But we also know that the United States is pulling out, that Canada is pulling out after spending significant investment in Afghanistan, after spending significant time talking about the importance of ensuring that rights for women and girls are protected, for example. I'm just wondering, has this violence against both the Hazara and the Sikh populations, what does it look like? Has it gone up significantly? Has the increase been significant? How much of that is related to the COVID, the challenges around COVID? Is that providing cover, I guess, for what's being done by the Taliban? And how much is because of the withdrawal? I'd like to get an understanding of the context in terms of the withdrawal and COVID-19 in that global pandemic. So Mr. Malley, if I could start with you, that would be wonderful.
Thank you very much. There has been a very significant escalation in violence against minorities in the period since the signing on the 29th of February 2020 of the bilateral agreement between the United States and the Taliban. That's not to suggest that there wasn't significant violence before that. Indeed, there was, but there's been an escalation. The reason, I think, is that the agreement between the US and the Taliban provided for, as it were, a moratorium on Taliban attacks on the forces of the United States and its allies. But the effect in practice has been to channel attacks by the Taliban against targets within the Afghan community. It inadvertently incentivized those kind of attacks. And if the aim of enemies of the Afghan state is to put on display symbolically the incapacity of that state to provide protection to the general public and, in a sense, discharge a key state function, then killing minorities is a very effective way of sending the signal that the government is impotent. Because in this kind of situation, as Hobbes once said, reputation of power is power. The Americans, with their agreement, boosted the reputation of the Taliban and undermined the reputation of the Afghan government. Attacks on minorities since then have aggravated that particular problem. In a sense, it's likely that in any situation of similar dimensions, minorities will find themselves significantly under attack. And for that reason, I don't see any likelihood that we're going to witness a diminution of such attacks in the near future.
Mr. Ajimal, would perhaps you'd like to jump in?
Yes, adding to that, as before the troops were leaving, the Sikh and Hindu communities in Afghanistan had to pay a jizya, a tax, a special tax to the Taliban in order to survive. Mm-hmm. When ISIS came in different parts of Afghanistan, they had to pay ISIS. The tax is utilized by these terrorist organizations to not only persecute these minorities, but under their law, determine a way to kill them. As in, they'll raise the tax rates to a point where these people cannot pay. And then in their eyes, it's okay to go and target these people for killings. It's also a way to fund their crime and continue to fund their terrorism. So as the troops are departing, the situation is going to escalate. These folks, just like the professor mentioned, will continue to get larger amounts of tax. They will continue to be persecuted, not only for symbolic reasons that they're maintaining control, but also to finance the terrorism.
And so what I'm also hearing from you, thank you very much for that, but what I'm also hearing from you is that, you know, we've heard from all the witnesses today that the urgency for Canada and other international bodies to act is very, very pressing, because of course it is not a matter of if, it is a matter of when. At the point that we're in right now, does Canada have a role to play in terms of the peace process, in terms of what's happening on the ground, in terms of protecting minorities in Afghanistan, you know, as part of that? Or is, you know, we have heard that Canada needs to do more, particularly once COVID is done, in terms of repatriating or just bringing people to Canada and allowing people to settle in Canada and make their homes here. But do we have a role to play in Afghanistan during this peace process, and what is that role? Mr. Ajmal, you seem to, maybe you might have something you could prepare for that, or sorry, I see.
Absolutely, I can absolutely respond. At this point in time, it's essential that these people flee. At this point in time, there is no viable solution in Afghanistan for these religious minorities. They're continuing to be persecuted. The government is unstable at the moment, and as the troops leave, the stability, although it may stabilize over time, any religious population and religious minorities residing in rural areas will absolutely be targeted immediately.
Thank you. Yeah, Mr. Ibrahimi, do you want to add anything to that as well? I know I'm running out of time.
I will be very quick. I hope the sound is working this time. I think Canada can do two things immediately. One is to support a UN-led commission of inquiry into the recent incidents of violence in Afghanistan. This is a move which was called for by the Afghanistan Independent Human Rights Commission in an investigation into incidents like 8th of May.
I apologize. I've just been informed by the clerk that it's not possible. Okay. No, it is can't speak. No interpretation. I apologize. Yes, and you've got 10 seconds left, Heather. Do you want to just conclude?
I'll cede my time. Yes.
Thank you very much, MP McPherson. And now we are moving to our second round of questions. This is going to be a 5-minute round from members. Members, also want to let you know that I understand we were going to have a vote shortly. When bells start, I will. I'm looking for unanimous consent from everybody that, you know, whoever's on that question will let that questioner finish up, and then we will have to conclude the session. Okay, is that okay from everybody? I'm just seeing. Okay, great. Okay, thank you very much. So second round, MP Zuberi for 5 minutes.
I'd like to thank all the witnesses for coming here and educating us. And it's not that we were unaware of a lot of the concerns that you're raising, but I think really bringing this into sharper focus for some of us. Myself, at the beginning of COVID, I have friends in the World Sikh Organization who reached out to me to let me know about the urgency of the situation of Sikhs in Afghanistan, Sikhs and Hindus, and just letting you know that it's something that I personally am, and many of my colleagues are highly sensitive to. I'd like to pick up on what Heather just was asking with respect to what. Although we do know that Afghanistan is not safe for minorities, that there are continuous bomb blasts and targeted attacks. If there could be some expose by those who are having some solutions of what we can do as a country to help bolster the position of minorities over there in Afghanistan, do our part to try to protect minorities over there. If there are any other suggestions, I'd like to open up the floor, please, along those lines. And we have Balpreet and Mr. Meli, please.
So I will just say that there is really no trust left amongst the Sikh community and what the government can do. It's not that the government is necessarily targeting or wants to drive these minorities out. It's just that they're unable to provide protection. For example, the individual did a suicide attack on the Kabul Gurdwara in March. He was dressed in a security uniform. So when they posted more security officers to the Gurdwara, the community was actually afraid. They've done token things like announcing that there will be a cultural day to celebrate the Afghan Sikh and Hindu contributions. That doesn't really mean anything. In terms of protections, the government is able to offer limited protection in Kabul and no protection in the other areas. In my own watch, we have seen the three communities, Kabul, Jalalabad, and Ghazni, be reduced to just Jalalabad and Kabul. The entire population of Sikhs and Hindus in Ghazni have left. So the options available to the community are to flee. The government isn't able to help.
Thank you, Balpreet. Mr. Maley, sorry.
Thank you. I think there are several things that are important at this point. One is to recognize that there is not a working peace process in Afghanistan at the moment. Lots of people are going through the motions, but essentially the agreement that the Americans signed with the Taliban was an exit agreement for the United States rather than a peace agreement for Afghanistan. And because the US at that point gave the Taliban everything that they really wanted, the Taliban have engaged in strategic stalling since then, but that is no longer the main game. And really a crisis management approach is a much better one for the Canadian government and like-minded governments to take. Recognizing that two things are very important. One is to maintain support not so much for any given government, but for a republican and pluralist system in Afghanistan, as opposed to the totalitarian order which the Taliban would like to impose. And one way of doing that is to seek every diplomatic channel available to send a signal that those who attempt to impose a totalitarian order can expect to be marginalized and isolated internationally. The other is with respect to vulnerable individuals to recognize that at a certain point there may be millions of refugees flowing out of Afghanistan, despite all the constraints on people movement that COVID has imposed. The numbers could well overwhelm the capacity of governments such as those in Iran and Turkey to prevent onward movement towards Europe. And there will be demands for a range of countries in the world to step up to provide resettlement for people who really will have no realistic option of going safely back to Afghanistan in the foreseeable future. And Canada, which has a very long history of humanitarian contributions in this respect, I think has a role to play there too.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, Mr. G. Singh, I don't know your first name, but please. You're on mute.
Yes.
And we have 30 seconds.
Sure. Our request is maybe perhaps a commission be instituted, especially for our heritage sites, how those can be preserved in conjunction and working in collaboration with the Afghani government. United States will love to help and assist, but that's something that is of a very, that really tugs at the hearts. We have historical shrines that are hundreds of years old where Guru Nanak Sahib Ji himself came and visited, and many Afghanistan families are not only interlinked there, but they're risking their lives because they refuse to leave them unguarded.
Thank you for underscoring the cultural importance of protection of cultural sites. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, MP Zaberi. And now we're moving to MP Genuis for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank the witnesses. As I was listening to the testimony at the beginning, I was thinking about the case of the St. Louis, which was a ship of Holocaust refugees, Jewish refugees that were turned away from Canada. And in my time as a parliamentarian, we had an official apology, in fact, delivered by the Prime Minister for Canada's lack of willingness to receive these fleeing refugees. And yet at the same time, we've been talking about this issue of the need for a special program to help vulnerable Afghan minorities for the entirety of the time I've been a parliamentarian, since 2015. And there is, I think, a significant frustration among many people, as we've heard tonight, about the lack of action. I gave my first member statement in the House in December of 2015 on this very issue, calling for the creation of a special program under Section 25 of the Immigration Refugee Protection Act. And I think it's important to underscore that that the letter that Balpreet Singh mentioned that was signed by MPs in support of a special program under Section 25 was also signed by our leader. Our immigration shadow minister, Jasraj Singh Holland, has personally been involved in sponsoring an Afghan Sikh family and done so before being an elected official. It's been a long time, though, and although some families from India have been helped, as we've heard tonight, we know the mechanism. It's a special program under Section 25 of the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act. It would allow direct sponsorship from Afghanistan to Canada, and yet it just hasn't happened. And we continue to call for that to take place. It's so necessary, and I don't know why it hasn't happened. So I want to start with a question for Balpreet Singh. Could you clarify whether the government has given you an outright no to the possibility of a Section 25 program, or whether they simply haven't answered the question? And then secondly, could you just speak to other precedents you're aware of where special programs under Section 25 have been used successfully for other communities?
Yeah, so we've been making this call for many years now. After the March 2020 incident, there was, of course, dialogue with CIC, and the answer that we got was, this isn't possible at this time. It wasn't a vehement no, but it was no for now. But the problem here is no for now, it puts these people at risk, and it's been so long. And when I made this first presentation, there were 2,006 left. After 2016, 5 years later, we have all these deaths. We have all this the evacuation, and they have no futures in India. I've already talked about the fact that there's no legislative mechanism to settle them there. They're not. India is not a signatory to the Refugee Convention. So this special program, it's a unique situation. It's a unique program that has been created for Syrian refugees. It's been created for, as I understand, Tibetan refugees who had gone to India. I understand for the Ismaili community, it's Ismaili refugees. These are vulnerable individuals who are easily identified by their appearance. And like I said, ISIS, Daesh has already vowed to drive them out of Afghanistan or kill them. So
thank you, and thank you for that very specific answer, mentioning other communities that have benefited from a special program, and the Sikh and Hindu community in Afghanistan, as well as other minorities, should benefit from it as well. I'm going to just give the balance of my time to Ms. Sahota.
Thank you, Garnet, and I'd like to thank all the witnesses.
Just so you're aware, 1 minute.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank all the witnesses for being here. Balpreet, my question to you is, I'm just going to build on what my colleague here said. What can the government do right now to help Afghan Sikhs basically save their lives?
Yeah, so the process to create this special program, even if we aren't able to bring them immediately, the process to create this program is something that we've been asking for a long time. The entire costs for the refugees that have settled here has been borne by the Sikh community. But the sad thing is, of the Helmand group that we're talking about, less than half, after 6 years, less than half have arrived here. So I appreciate the efforts of the government and certainly the efforts of the Buller Foundation. But if these folks are going to be in India for the next, I don't know how many years, their lives are going to continue to suffer. And those that are in Afghanistan, they will die.
Thank you. We are now moving to MP Alexis Brunel-Duceppe for 5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Chairman. We've discussed quite a bit about the Afghan government, Afghan law, but we really haven't discussed the social context in Afghanistan. I'd like to hear from the witnesses. I posed an earlier question, what can the government do? But what is the civil population, civil society doing in Afghanistan? I think that's very important vis-a-vis Sikh and Hindu. Anyone would like to attempt an answer there? Mr. Malley, perhaps?
Thank you. Civil society in Afghanistan is a significant actor, but it is a very vulnerable actor as well. Something like 3/4 of the Afghan population is under the age of 30. These people have very often been influenced by forces of globalization that no previous generation had encountered. And the positive sign is that one meets many people right across the board who don't carry the baggage of prejudices which some earlier generations carried with them. At the same time, there has been something of a disposition in recent months for people in Western countries to say, because civil society is so vibrant in Afghanistan, this will provide a bulwark against the worst kind of policy settings that the Taliban might seek to implement if they were to return to power. I think this is a misconception. It's actually shoved civil society activists right into the front line where they are now being assassinated by the Taliban. And civil society, of course, was extremely vibrant in the Weimar Republic in the late 1920s and early 1930s. But a vibrant civil society is also vulnerable and subject to decapitation. In Afghanistan, for example, civil society thrives on the basis of social media, which provide connections between different people, and it would be relatively easy for a repressively minded state to shut down communications of that sort. So civil society is certainly something to support in Afghanistan, but it is not a magic bullet that can be used to address the problems of repression that other kinds of groups are putting on the agenda at the moment.
Thank you, Mr. Melly. Another question which arises, there's been years and years and years of conflict, decades of armed conflict in Afghanistan. What repercussions? Well, I mean, the Soviets were there, the Americans, and then there's the intertribal warlords going at each other. What has this have as consequences on religious minorities in Afghanistan? And this is an open question to any witness that would like to take it.
Monsieur Ajiman.
Mr. Ajiman, and perhaps Mr. Singh.
Consequences as a military leader comes in, as different governments change, as the Taliban or ISIS take rule, each and every one persecutes religious minorities first. It's a matter of control, just like the professor mentioned in his earlier statements. The religious minorities are controlled. If anyone tries to assist the religious minorities, they are then targeted themselves. So civil society has unfortunately been put in a position where they are not able to help any religious minorities because they themselves will become a target. So this isn't a matter of a new government coming in or a matter of a warlord being overthrown, but this is a matter of each and every power broker that has come in has continued to persecute religious minorities.
Oui, rapidement, Monsieur Singh.
And quick response from Mr. Singh, and if possible, Chavenda.
The results of this internet-assigned warfare and these different warlords coming to power have been a mass exodus for religious societies. For religious minorities, and a genocide of the religious minorities. Those are the two results: is a mass exodus and a mass killing.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. Thank you, Alexi. Now we're moving to MP McPherson for 5 minutes.
Thank you. This is all very. I mean, it's not new information, of course, that we're receiving, but I am just really struggling to understand, particularly when we hear that the Canadian government has been able to implement some of these immigration policies for other groups, why they're so reluctant to do so for Afghani minorities. It's deeply concerning, and I think something that we need to continue to push them on, I guess. Now, as the NDP member of this committee, I think this will probably be our last opportunity. I wondered whether or not it would make sense for us to just go through and have people. Is there anything that we have not covered in the meeting today that you'd like to share with the committee, that you'd like to make sure gets on record? Anything that we haven't asked you but you'd like to share with us? I'd be happy to open up the microphone for you to do that. And I don't see any. Oh, Mr. Malley.
Thank you very much. I think one issue which needs to be kept in mind is that there is a risk of genocide in Afghanistan. This may seem to be a florid proposition, but I think unfortunately it's historically grounded. The substantial outflow of Hazaras from Afghanistan actually began in August 1998, following a massacre that took place in Mazar-e-Sharif, which the Pakistani journalist Ahmed Rashid, in his Yale University Press book on the Taliban, described as, quote, genocidal in its ferocity, unquote. If one looks at Article 2 of the Genocide Convention, one can actually match that up with various practices which have surfaced recently in Afghanistan, which suggest that the genocidal intent is there on the part of at least some groups within the country. There has, of course, historically been a great deal of legitimate attention paid to the vulnerabilities of women in Afghanistan because the Taliban are the world's least feminist movement. But the Taliban are not going to try to kill all the women in Afghanistan, but they are capable of trying to kill all the Sikhs or all the Hindus or all the Hazaras. Mm-hmm. And given that that's the case, I think the whole thrust of the Genocide Convention that Raphael Lemkin struggled so hard to have adopted is that one should not simply be waiting until it's happened. One needs to be alert to the real dangers of this kind of mass killing materializing, and one needs to be poised to do something. That, I think, is probably the gravest danger that haunts the situation in Afghanistan.
And I will just I just have a few more seconds, so I will hand it over to Ms. Bilhar, please.
Thank you. I think it would be important for me to mention that we are actively working on a program that will settle the current population. It's been a long process, but it is also one that has to take into account that we also are dealing with the rules of once a population has arrived in India and how they are deemed refugees or not. I think it's important for us to note that the partnership that we are creating is a model that we will advocate for in terms of being used for other populations, as well as the continuous assistance of Afghan populations that still remain both in Afghanistan or are within other displaced areas around the world.
Thank you, Ms. Bihar. And then just finally, Ms. Chiavenda.
Yes, to build on Professor Malley's comments, I think it's key that we look at this as something that might be headed towards genocide. And I think it's important when we look at some of the attacks that have happened, such as in particular the attack on the maternity hospital where laboring mothers and newborns were killed, or the other girls' attacks. This was often interpreted as an attack on women, but I think symbolically, this can be interpreted as an attack on future generations and on those people who are bringing future generations of Hazaras into the world. And so I think that symbolic aspect needs to be kept in mind when we're thinking about genocide and the attacks that are going on right now.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I don't know if the bells, I don't think have gone yet. So we are moving to the third round, but we have MP Baker for 5 minutes or whatever time remains.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to thank all the witnesses for being here. I'm learning a tremendous amount from all of you, and I wish I could ask questions to all of you. We heard some testimony.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Point of order, Mr. Chu.
Sorry, I had my hands up, but I didn't speak. No, that's okay.
Okay.
And sorry to interrupt our friend here. I was just wondering if we could provide 4 minutes per party. So 4 times 4 parties equals 16, and that should be more than enough. I hate to have cut short the witnesses. They've been so genuine and willing to come to our meeting, and I would like to propose with the unanimous consent the meeting by 16 minutes so that every party has 4 minutes.
Okay, I would say it will. I think it depends on how long the bells will go for. So I don't know if they're going to walk it in or not, and how that will happen.
Mr. Chair, just interrupted the 15-minute bell, I believe.
It is a 15-minute bell. Okay, has it gone off yet? So I'm looking around, but I don't know if we've got unanimous consent. I don't know if we could do it either. The time just will not allow.
The bells have not gone off yet, but they will likely go any minute now.
I would suggest we continue until the bells go off.
Sure. MP Baker.
Thanks very much, Chair. So again, I want to thank all the witnesses for being here. I'm learning a tremendous amount from all of you. We heard some testimony from one of my MP colleagues suggesting that Canada is not responding to the crisis facing Afghan Sikhs or not doing so with urgency. And my understanding is that this government has doubled the number of refugees from the previous government, and we've been a leader in refugee resettlement for the last 3 years. And I know that we've been working with the Manmeet Singh Bhullar Foundation to resettle families, Afghan Sikhs. So my question is to the Manmeet Singh Bhullar Foundation, in respect to the statement that Canada is not responding to the crisis facing Afghan Sikhs or not doing so with urgency, is this accurate? Is this correct? And how would you characterize Canada's response?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. The government of Canada, like I said in my opening remarks, is the most viable option for this population. And so that is essentially the foundation through which we have continued to have conversations with members of government as well as government departments. I think that it's important to remember that I make no bones about it, that we need to get this work done. We have support from across the aisle. We have and within the Liberal caucus. I have always said this is not a partisan issue. This is a humanitarian issue. The responsibility lies on every single one of us. But we have had success, and I want to continue to have success. We are in the process of settling the initial families that arrived in India from the province of Helmand, and we continue to say to the government during our discussions that we are creating a model that needs to apply to the families that have arrived since, who are part of the attacks that took place at the Gurdwara. And we also want to make sure that the lessons learned here are applied to humanitarian concerns regardless of where they occur across the world. The thing is, we have to be able to learn and then apply. And as some of the other witnesses mentioned, always focus on a proactive approach versus a reactive approach. In a situation like this, reactive is too late and proactive is what we want to see. How can we assist these communities before the inevitable happens and that we lose lives? But I will say that we have had support from the government, and we continue to make sure that we press them on making this work a reality.
Thank you. And I'm going to apologize to everyone, to the witnesses, and of course the members know that the bells have started ringing. We do have a question or a vote in the House. So we're going to thank, on behalf of the committee and all the members, all of the staff, the interpreters, the clerk, we want to thank you for your testimony and for your answers to the many questions. We truly appreciate it. Thank you very much, everyone. That will conclude our meeting. We're adjourned.
Thank you.